Shall we talk about LEC? It is terrible. Holy shit. Some of these games this week have been misery.
What's wild is the vibe's still just like the last split. The teams that are good has changed, but it's still a complete mess of a region. And just like last split, G2 sort of seems to fuck around in the BO1s. They don't seem locked in because why did they need to be? As long as you make it to this next portion, they're going to run over everyone. But mate, what I loved is this. I was telling everyone on my Discord, I can't lose with the teams that are at the bottom because once I saw, wait a minute, it's either going to be Karmine Corp or Mad Lions who's going to miss the... Oh, baby. Oh, baby. And mate, Mad Lions almost made it themselves in Karmine Corp. Think about how glorious this is, guys. Think about all the fucking stupid narratives that, like, Yamato was the problem. Like, if you fire him, the draft. Look at the drafts, though, bro. You know what? I'm going to say this, Monty, about Karmine Corp. It's a bigger point. It's a bigger point to be made. Because the number one set of check stealers in fucking esports right now are general managers because they don't get fired somehow. Somehow these guys never get fired, even when their job is to make decisions in hiring people. So they hire someone, he goes bad at the job, they have to fire him. They hire another guy, he's bad at the job, I have to fire him. Eventually you fire the guy who's doing the hiring. He's bad at his job because what is going on in these orgs? Like Karmine Corp, by the way, right now, looks like from top to bottom, it is a shit show. There is nobody who understands how to build a team, nobody who can coach a team, and most of the players fucking suck. Like this is just trash, mate. I even knew they'd win slightly more games, but I also knew they'd be irrelevant. What is this?
I made the joke on Twitter, Thorin, that I have firsthand experience that being a popular personality doesn't necessarily make you good at winning professional League of Legends games.
Awesome.
Right? Because famously the joke is about Renegades and how terrible Renegades was as a roster. But, I will also say, like Kometo, I was winning in tier 2.
Off the screen.
I was winning in tier 2, Thorin. I was winning in tier 2. Like, remember that Renegades got into LCS by being promoted. And Kometo was winning, effectively the same thing, which is, if we still had promotion relegation, he would win the thing that would get him into the promotion tournament, right? But it's one thing to win at the amateur level, and it's another thing to continue that winning into the professional level. And what we have seen is that, we all knew Yamato wasn't the problem, but Karmine Corp has now ended the season with the exact same record that they had with Yamato, with exactly the same fucking problems, except, Doran, on the eye test, they look worse than they did.
Yep.
Because at least they had better drafts. At least they had stronger early games. A lot of the times they're just losing just straight up from like minute 1 in some of these games. And they
were in most of those early games. Last split, of course.
And even when they're in the games, they still throw in the same ways that they did. The players that we know are bad are still there. And Kometo continues to hold on to Seiken because he's his buddy and because he made him a promise or feels that he needs to have loyalty to him. My question for you is this, Thorin. What does it take for these fans to actually get mad at Karmine Corp and hold Kometo and their management responsible? Because these are the people who are going out there every week and making the ruckus in the studio. Aren't they angry at this point in time that this team looks like such dog shit and that the org is not doing anything and fixed exactly 0 of the problems, which everybody fucking told them, but the fan base was just in denial about?
That's the problem, though, with the fans of your team, not just being a fans of sport, but the fans of influencers and personalities, because obviously they still love the personalities. They still love the fucking we're part of this guy's stream. So I think the problem is that overlap protects the management. Because here's the stupidest thing about this, Monty. Here's how you know how different fan bases are. You know what? I've memed on the T1 fans a lot, but in a fucked up way. I don't approve of the idea you'd actually send a truck or whatever. I think that's a bit, because I also do think, as Richard's always pointed out, there's almost an intimation of potentially violence even behind that, of sort of it's more than just I disagree. It's not a post on a website. There's something intimidating about it. You know what I mean? I do think there's a part of that. It is a bit like that famous thing where they say in Brazilian esports, come to Brazil. It's you're not saying come to Brazil so I can have a fucking picnic, are you? We all know what you're implying. You're
not going to hand me a caparina when I get there. You're going to try and shoot me.
The implication is it's intimidation. You're going to fuck me up if I come there. It's like saying see you at LAN like we used to say in UK Counter-Strike. It's not not because I'm going to shake your hand, so I'm going to slap you in this Algiana. So I will just say, the one thing that I actually can respect, though, is at least T1 fans do actually live up to the idea, however misguided, that T1 is supposed to be excellent and they demand excellence. Why are Karmine Corp fans giving a pass to their team after all these years of big talk about how they were going to come to LEC, Monty? They've been winning all these EU Masters with different rosters. You come to the LEC and you're the worst team 2 splits in a row, and you don't even have an issue with the management. Bro, are you even a fan of sports? Like, as far as I can tell, you are just a fan of the name Karmine Corp. You don't even want to be good at the game. This is exactly when you say, hey, this isn't good enough. By the way, now even more so the last split, Monty. Now it's 2 splits, and this is the split that gets you an MSI. This is a split that matters for points. So it's actually way more egregious to be bad in this split than the first one. Of course. And yet they're just chilling. Because Yamato isn't there, they're just chilling. Everyone's just fine, apparently.
And now, Thorin, you lost your opportunities. You could have had Trimby, potentially. I mean, if you offered him enough money.
If you think how Upset played this split, mate, if you literally just the Trimby change, I think they would have won a couple of these games. No, there was a Zeri game he had. There's a couple of games I think they could have won if they'd have had Trimby.
I mean, Targamas was just criminally bad this week.
He just does nothing, mate.
I mean, these teams, like, if you actually just look at the way that Karmine Corp plays, they really just have no synergy and they just don't give a fuck. Like, I literally this week had to watch, in the Heretics game, they can't even engage properly. So they have a Karma speed boost and Targamas is playing Rakan and Bo is on Jarvan. And basically, Targamas and Bo just take turns trying to engage. So Targamas goes in with Rakan ult, then leaves the fight. And then after that, Bo goes in with Jarvan ult. Like, they actually just can't coordinate a singular engage. And in the final game, it's like I'm not going to read too much into the game versus BDS because it looked to me like literally everybody had fucking mentally checked out of that game. Like, I think they were just trying to lose. Like, they just didn't nobody gave a fuck anymore. Bo was like,
no, it looked like
Bo was just like playing terrible. Yep. Targamas was just like in the river as Braum, dying randomly 24/7. Like, Targamas was literally, I was watching this on my stream and I was just tilting out of my mind because Targamas is like in bot river with 2.5 minutes left for Drake. Upset is in base and Saken is on his way to mid lane. So he has nobody and and Bo is on his red buff. So he knows he has no pressure. He has no reason to contest for vision in the middle of the river. He just walks into the river and dies. I'm like, what the fuck is this guy even doing? And he did this like multiple times. I mean, some of these games were just like criminally bad. And if we want to criticize Yamato, let's talk about the draft that they had versus BDS. Okay, so we draft this composition. Remember Adam, how he plays Olaf? Now, R5 Olaf has been a kind of ace in the hole for a lot of teams. I've mentioned this many times on this show. It is very powerful. Like we've seen like D+ pull it out, where if you have low mobility carries and you have, especially when you have Karma. Now, they didn't have Karma this game. If you have low mobility carries, you can actually just pull off an R5 Olaf because you're not blind picking the Olaf. And even though he wasn't a bad matchup versus Jace, by the time you get to the mid and late game, he just presses R and just runs all over to Leah and Jace and Smolder, and there's nothing you can do about it, and he just assassinates your backline. And like, of all the teams in the world, why would you just not suspect BDS, Adam, to fucking do this? Like, surely Adam is just sitting there in the draft, just waiting for R5, rubbing his little Adam hands together. He says, oh, they did it. They did pick me Olaf. That's what he says. It's so free, guys. It's so fucking free. So Yamato would never, is my point. Yamato would never do this. This is such a fucking easy trap to avoid, in my opinion. And yet, here we are, just walking into it. And this is also in spite of the fact that Cabashard also plays Olaf and should know that this is coming.
Mad, isn't it? It's not mad.
I don't know. But to diagnose this team, like, Upset has been underwhelming, but I think he just gave up inside. One thing that I'm never thrilled with upset is like when the team starts to go badly, he starts to just phone it in a lot of the time. But Targamas has been terrible. Saken has again been terrible. These guys are just actively bad at this point in time. Bo, as we know from his time on Vitality, he will do really well, and then when hope is gone, he just runs it down. Like he does this.
By the way, I'll always give him as well a slight bit of extra leeway, which is he's a total foreigner in an alien region to him. Like, understandably, you'd be even more effective if things go badly in that scenario. Like, I don't blame him in that respect. It does suck that he hasn't made it aware. Here's the other thing I want to say very quickly as well, Monty. One of the things that's really showed me, as usual, that bozos don't even fucking watch the game is, you know, that thing I always bring up, which is every time Perks is bad, they talk, and suddenly they're talking about like the old G2 Perks as though he's like Trophy, he's like a lane god or something. I'm like, he was never that player. What? This is like a straw man. Similarly, right? They do this thing now. You'll have heard it because you've made content where they go, huh, Milky Way. So you mean this is the same thing as with that Bo guy? No, you're not listening to what we're saying. What we said about Bo was he had insane mechanics and he was like essentially he was like the guy who just went forwards all the time and he was a psychopath. That's the opposite. We're saying Milky Way is actually insanely like fucking like his timing and decision making is part of it. That was never something we said Bo had. What are you talking about? That's such a shit straw man to bring up. The difference is Bo was a mega talent. The Milky Way guy is like, the joke is already like the complete package. It feels like on like fucking
he shot calls. And you can tell you can tell Milky Way is shot calling because so many of the fights they take are dependent around his engages.
Even he clearly asked him to. Yes.
Yeah. It's him and Life are obviously the people who are shot calling on this roster and controlling, you know, what happens on the map. But it's also just his pathing is very intelligent. Like Milky Way sets up game states. And it's incredibly impressive, especially for a rookie jungler to be doing all of this. He's super valuable, by the way, because
well, here's the analogy, Monty. The point of Bo to me always was to be the tip of the spear. He's like the super aggro mechanics guy. You push in there and then you all follow up and win the fight. Like that's why the idea he's in a team in this one where people don't follow up. I can't handle it, mate.
Or don't shot call either.
The saddest thing of all to me is this, bro. If you got this, if you took Bo and gave him Niski as his mid laner and fucking Mac as his coach, he'd be the MVP of the LEC because they would just follow up on all the players for fuck's sake. And he'd have someone to hold his hand as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Because he looks totally ineffective in this team because, as you say, like there's nothing left for him. And at the end, he obviously gets bombed out. I get it. He gets bombed out.
Here's a thought experiment for you. What happens if Bo is kicked out of this roster? Like, does Vitality pick him up? You know, maybe it's not the best
sick pickup, wouldn't it?
Maybe it's not the best synergy with VTO, but with the coaching staff they have, it might actually work.
They could play that player.
And
sure.
Vitality has been the worst player. Like Douglas has been the worst player on Vitality this year, even though he's gotten better recently. He's been better recently, but especially in winter he was bad. I mean, it's not like Yzma's doing great on SK, so Bo could theoretically go there as well. I mean, Bo is still going to be considered a major upgrade, especially as his English keeps getting better. I mean, I listen to these Karmine Corp comms, and you know, again, Bo is the one who's probably talking the most, but that doesn't mean that his communication is effective, not because of language differences, but because I just don't think he's that shot caller guy. Like, I just don't. He spends a lot of his time.
Like he's a very strong macro sense, Monty.
He also is very non-committal in comms, where he's asking questions a lot. Like, should we go in? He's not really the guy who's like, you know, somebody needs to be there being like, Bo, I need you to do this thing when I do this thing, and then he will do it. I'm pretty sure. I don't think he wants to be the guy making the plan. That's the sense I get. He's like actively trying to ask other people to make plans in comms, and nobody's there. And also, like, frankly, being a jungler at the professional level is highly dependent on your synergy with your support. And fucking Targamas is terrible and doesn't talk. So.
Oh, no, mate. He has whack solo lanes and a support that doesn't talk, and he's in a region not speaking his native language, and he tries to go in all the time. Like, that's the recipe for a really bad split, mate. That's how you get to look really terrible. Because you're just going to be on your own all day long with no help.
Yeah. So,
the problem is this, Monty. The one area I will actually admit this now. The one area we missed about Bo was this. He was playing with Doinby. And you can't understate that, but we did in a way. Doinby is the ultimate player to do exactly all the things we just described. So essentially, he was filling in all the like inexperience and macro logic. Okay, he was given that all. So without that, we thought that Perks would be that. Obviously, that is a failure of Perks, in my opinion. Last year in Vitality, he couldn't help Bo in that regard. But this just hasn't worked. The combos we've made him with so far, unfortunately.
I mean, I'm I'm kind of horny on this idea of him to Vitality now, because I need to see the actual psychopathy that would be Hylissang and Bo playing together.
Mate, the good news is that at least both go in. So you what? Both go in, though, wouldn't they? And also, now you can only kill one target at a time, Monty. So which one are you picking? You know, Hilly's going in, Bo's going in too. So
I would love to see that, frankly. I think that shit would be hilarious.
Yes.
That would be the dream. But I don't think, frankly, if I'm Karmine Corp, I don't let this guy go, because even though he does get tilted by being on losing teams for long enough, and you see it in his gameplay, and he starts to perform worse. And I mean, he wasn't great in their last game of the split, that's for sure. I think you need to fix a couple of the other problems with this roster first before you kind of throw Bo out.
There's what people haven't thought about, Monty. They all love to do this thing where they rewrite last year's Vitality. And this is why I know you're all bums. Because have you ever noticed how I expose and make fun of people for things that are true, but you have to make up things and lie to make fun of people? That means you didn't have a basis. So last year's Vitality, I'm told, Monty, was one of the worst teams ever, and they were just shit the whole year. But then when I watched them in the winter split, they were actually doing pretty well in the BO1s, then they fell apart. Then in the spring split, they finished third, ahead of G2, by the way. Does anyone know? Does no one remember that detail, by the way? That Vitality last spring finished ahead of G2 in the playoffs. So we all got to pretend that didn't happen. It did happen. Then in summer, they were complete shit. It was only in summer, Monty, they fell apart and were shit. Right? Karmine Corp now has done 2 10th place finishes. And as of right now, with 0 roster moves announced, there's no reason to believe they won't be bottom 2 in the next split. This is actually going to be one of the worst org runs ever in esports, mate. This is mental. Not least because no one I know had this team ranked 10th or 9th in the preseason rankings. Everyone thought they had some good players. So this is actually going to be one of the most underwhelming entries to LEC ever, mate.
I mean, Kaiser's available.
By the way, I'll take that in a heartbeat. Of course.
Yeah, I mean, Kaiser's available. They could bring Yamato back, because I think Yamato is still useful
the worst thing
for them.
Is, sadly, he would even probably do that because he's just such a fucking cool guy. But I hate it. I hate the idea you never even consider coming back,
Well, I think if he wants to make the money that's on his contract, he has to come back if they ask him. Otherwise, he would give up his contract. So if he wants the money and he wants the job,
still make a whole bunch of money while he's sat on the bench, though, right? How does that work? If they tell you you're activated again, do you have to play? Is that how it works?
I think he probably has to coach again if they ask him to come back and do the job, right? Well, I would imagine, basically they've said well, we can't terminate your contract, but we also don't want you. So you're just going to chill and make money. And, don't say anything bad about the team. And I think if they were hey, come back, he has to come back.
From now on, every time this team sucks, I'm just going to call him Camel Toe, not Kameto. I'm just going to say Camel Toe. There you go. There you go. That's all I'm going to do. Because all I see is a bunch of fucking lips flapping on stream.
Wow.
I also just can't handle how whack it is. Bro, if you see, the whole thing, remember, in theory, Monty, these guys should be even more motivated than T1 fans. They're going on a nationalism tip of so surely logically you're making France look stupid here. You're making them look like bombs. By the way, this team was the fucking team that won EU Masters a bazillion times. You're making the LFL look stupid now. Is this not a big deal to you guys? I'd hate it if my team was in 10th place. I hate it. I don't even like the fucking team.
I mean, I think there are definitely approaches that you could take to this roster. If you were actually able to swap out some of the players, that might be interesting. But I mean, it's really just the roster changes they didn't make, Thorin, that are so puzzling. Niski is on SK because Karmine. I mean, I'm pretty sure if Niski got a Karmine Corp offer, he would have taken it over SK. I think that's pretty fair to say, especially since he's personal friends with Kameto. And yet he felt loyalty to Seiken, so they didn't get Niski. I don't know why Targamas is still on this roster, but they just passed by on Trimby just sitting there when they could have signed Trimby potentially before, he got an offer himself, and Trimby certainly still looks good. So now, would Trimby have gone to this dumpster fire roster if he had another choice? Maybe not. But as far as I know,
I actually think he would. I think
really?
He would have said yes. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.